All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. Pastor Skyler's going to lock us in so no one escapes. There you go. What are you doing over there? You're supposed to... I don't know. All right. How's everyone doing this evening? Good? Do you have a blessed week?
Yes.
Good. I hope so. I'm blessed just to have you here. Hey, Maynard's here. Hey. All right. Just in time for everyone to stare and say, hi, Maynard. It's okay. All right. Well, we are back with the series, How Dare You? Answering Questions to a World Full of Questions. This week, we are on week number 3. Please remember, we have one more week of class. We're looking at the LGBT issues broadly, introductorily, next week. But thank you for being here this week if you plan to be here next week, because as I mentioned at the beginning of the class, this week's going to be foundational to next week. But this is week 3, and if you remember, we're going to do a very quick review because I got a couple clips for you and see how well you remember some things. First week, we were together here in this class. We looked at quote-unquote Christian cults and asked what question? What was the big question for week 1?
What do they have in common? Who is God?
Those are good. That wasn't the starting question, though.
Oh, what makes a cult?
That's a good question. The question we asked the first week and the second week, and really not this week. We'll ask it again next week, though. We're asking the question, what is a Christian? Right, you remember that? That was like the first thing at the top of your page there. What is a Christian, quote-unquote Christian cults? What really makes someone a Christian? And what makes someone a cult? And what really defines or differentiates what we believe from these other groups? We looked at a couple of those things. And I told you that when you talk with someone who's part of a cult group or a quote-unquote Christian cult group, there's something you have to be aware of in your conversation. What was the one thing you had to remember? And I told you the story about me forgetting it.
Language.
The language what?
Barrier.
The language barrier. I'm going to show you a clip. Some of you may have seen this clip this week. This is making like viral rounds around the world. Who saw this clip this week?
What clip is it?
No one's seen this?
No.
Whoa!
Yes.
Man, I've heard all kinds of stuff about this. Okay. So this lady right here is the winner of the Mrs. America pageant. And no. This is a woman. She won the Mrs. America pageant. But part of the competition was this segment right here where she is asked a very important question and gives a very good answer. And it's a positive viral moment. Everyone's excited because she gives a great answer. However, I want to see if you catch some things. Pretty positive message of all the things that she could have said. In our day and age, when did you feel as a woman most empowered? And her answer was having 7 children. That's a great answer. That's something that a lot of Christians got excited about. Hey, there's some positive messaging in our world, and it goes viral, and everyone's seeing it. And it's great. I applaud her for that answer. I really do. However, did you hear anything slightly? The way she said having children was rather unique, right?
He brought them to the earth.
Bringing sacred souls to the earth. Good, you're all catching it. Excellent. I immediately caught that when I heard that, and it didn't take long for me to dig up, who this lady is. She's from Utah, and she is a Mormon, yes. And if you know about the Mormon faith, there's a reason she said things that way. There's a language barrier, and a lot of people, a lot of Christians got all excited about this and have even called her a Christian. Look at this great Christian answer to this question. Well, it was a great answer, sure. It was a positive answer, something I can applaud her for, but we just need to have the maturity and the awareness and the honesty to say, that is not a Christian answer. Bringing pre-incarnate souls from Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother to their earthly probation so they can be exalted and to become gods is not a Christian answer. As much as I applaud her celebration of motherhood in a day and age when you can't even define what a mother is. I do applaud her for that. So, A practical application of what we talked about 2 weeks ago. Then last week we looked at Roman Catholicism. Again, asking the question, what is a Christian? Is Catholicism a fellow Christian group? I shared my opinion on that, why I do not consider Catholicism to be a fellow Christian denomination because the Gospel of Rome fails. And I told you in the practical issues segment, remember there was the practical issues, the formal issue of authority, what is the ultimate authority? The material issue of how are you saved? Is it by faith or is it by faith plus your works to achieve merit, to achieve grace? And then the gospel issue of whether grace is sufficient or simply necessary. In the practical issues segment, we talked about Rome's claim to authority, the issues of the popes and stuff. And I told you this is Rome's claim. What, bud? That's my son peeking in on us back there. Hello, son. Rome's claim to tell you what the gospel is, what the Bible is because they claim this unbroken chain of apostolic authority back to Jesus. Well, let's hear it one more time, just very briefly. Very good questions, and if you took the time to watch that discussion with Candace Owen, her Catholic husband, and her Protestant friend, Allie Stuckey, you heard that claim multiple times. Owen's husband, his last name I think is Farmer, George Farmer, I think is his name, made the claim multiple times. Well, the Catholic Church is Christianity, and it's you Protestants who have to explain why you're not Catholics. We are the standard. We have the unbroken chain of connection back to Jesus. And I made the brief statement that is just patently false. If you want to claim an unbroken chain, then you need to explain the 4 popes in the 1400s. You need to explain the 60-year pornocracy. You need to explain something I forgot to mention was the 400 years in which to become pope, you had to condemn a previous pope to hell. His name was Honorius. To become pope, you had to say he was a heretic, he's in hell. For 400 years, that was the inauguration oath you had to take. If you want to claim that the Council of Nicaea in 325 with decree number 6 was saying, yeah, the Pope's in charge, look it up on your phones. It doesn't say that. If you want to make that claim, good for you. I'm not going to dare try to make that claim. If you're going to try to claim that there was a Pope there was even a bishop in Rome for the first 100 years, go for it, but to claim an unbroken chain of authority directly from Jesus and the apostles, Rome claims it constantly. And now today they have Francis. I am thankful that I'm a Protestant, not because I think everyone in history was a Protestant, but because I can leave them what they were and appreciate what they were. I don't have to morph them into anything. Catholics have to morph everyone in history into a Catholic, and it's just not true. So anyway, there was an example of that. This week we're going to be looking at step number 3, looking at something called secularism. My clicker will work there. Secularism. And instead of your first blank there being what is a Christian, we want to ask the question, what is secularism? Because secularism and Christianity, there's really no way to really marry the two. People try to marry all kinds of things, Islam and Christianity. But to try to mesh secularism, which says I don't need God, I don't believe there is a God, with Christianity is very difficult. There are people that have tried to do it in different ways, but by and large, that's not the case. So, really quick, anyone help me out? What is secularism? When we talk about being a secularist or a secular idea, what does that mean? What does that refer to?
Non-religious.
Okay, non-religious, you said what? The world, okay, as in not the church, not Christianity, possibly.
Atheistic, maybe?
Can refer to someone maybe who's an atheist, not necessarily, but yeah.
Logic and science can trump anything a religious person has to say.
Okay, a perspective that maybe reason, rationality are, you cannot connect them or merge them with faith and belief, that kind of idea, sure. The word secularism is a weird one. I'm going to be using it a certain way tonight, but just so we're aware, the word secular can be used in a lot of different ways. There are people that will argue that America was once a Christian nation. And then there are others who will argue that America has always been a secular nation. Well, if we're simply using the word secular to refer to the idea that the church and the state are not the same entity, then yes, America has always been a secular nation. We have a First Amendment guarantee that Congress will not make a law establishing a religion. That is secularism, simplistically defined. Americans kind of think that everyone's lived that way, and that's simply not the case. Most humans through history have lived in a sacral society. What is sacralism? Anyone aware of the word sacralism? Simply refers to when you have a church state. When the government and the church are so intimately connected to that to be part of a country, to be part of a state, you have to be part of a church. It's called sacralism.
Is that like with the Church of England?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Pretty much every country in Europe has been sacral or even still is. So sacralism. That's an R, not a V, in case you're wondering. My wife's not here to mock my penmanship. So sacralism, so sacralism, simply refers to a state church. Most human beings through history have lived in a society of a state church. America is very unique in that way. So if that's all we mean by it, I guess you could say that America is a secular nation. However, when the term secular is used in conversation today, we're generally referring to an idea much deeper than that. It's the idea that we don't want religion in society. You can have your own religion, you can keep it in your church, keep it in your house, but don't bring it outside. We want to live in a society, in a world where religion, it's kind of like being part of the track club or the Jeep club or part of the band at school. Like, okay, that's your thing, but don't bother me with it. Don't tell me about it. And this is seen in all kinds of different ways. And some of you have already shared with me that you have family that are not Christians, that would reject the Christian faith, would reject religion as a whole. And here's another practical example from my life. This picture was taken by my best friend. I grew up with him. He went to church, went to the youth group, VBS, all that kind of stuff. And before he died in 2010, one of the last things that he did was go to this protest in support of it, mocking the very thing that he had grown up with me saying he believed. And as I sat in his funeral on July 4th of 2010, there were people there, including his youth pastor, who said, oh yeah, he believed this stuff. He's in heaven. And I don't have that confidence, because the last things that my friend did, said, promoted, said to me were a complete rejection of anything religious, let alone Christian. And it led to his suicide. And there's a reason for it. And yet so many Christians are stuck in this position of asking, why is our world the way it is? Why is this happening? I mean, many of you, being a little older than me, remember a time, just a little, not you, you. Most of you will remember a time when, at least culturally, there was some sort of religious remnants left over. There was something of a respect for the Bible, something of a respect for the church. Remember the old cowboy movies when you'd have the showdown and the one guy would shoot the other one? What would be the last thing the guy who lost said? In almost every movie. No, thirsty no. See you in hell. Right? Oh. There was a reason for that. Obviously it's meant as an insult. But there was something in Western and American culture that was left over, even as those movies were being produced and that line was making it into the scripts, where what you're doing is bad, what you did was bad, and you will be held accountable for it. There will be consequences for what you've done. There's a remnant of a Judeo-Christian worldview that's observable even in that. My great-grandfather, who died here in Hemet in 2003, took me to Carl's Jr. down on Ramona in Florida. One of my only memories of my great-grandfather. And he told me how growing up in Kentucky during the Great Depression, he learned to read in school, along with every other student, by reading the Bible. Everyone. It was part of the culture. And some of us kind of remember that world. And the reality is we don't live in that world anymore. We live in a completely secularized America, a completely secularized West. In Europe, Christian Europe has been long gone. And Christians are asking the question, how is this happening? How is this possible that all this has happened? How is it that my friend would go this route? What drew him that direction? Well, we're going to watch a number of clips here tonight. I'm going to let a lot of secularists speak for themselves. And I apologize for the bluntness of some of what they're going to say. But you're all experiencing it from your grandkids, your kids, your neighbors. So we want to address it bluntly. So first one is this clip here from Anna Carpazian. Anyone know her from the Young Turks? I'm going to let her share her opinion of you bringing your religion into the public sphere. Okay. Honesty, I do appreciate that. I think I was hearing it over there. You have the right to say that, but do you not recognize that the Constitution that you just cited was written by people who had the worldview that you just threw out the window? Just to point that out. But more importantly, what happens to a society that does that? That says, I don't care about the Bible, and more importantly, Anna Carpazian is a full-blown progressive secularist and is open about that. That's not an insult, that's how she identifies herself. What is the ultimate result of that worldview? Yes?
Well, it becomes authoritarian where
You're right.
anyone who holds the opposite view than what they believe isn't allowed to speak.
That is very often the case, and we're going to look at that. Yes, Stephen?
The morals just go out the window.
The morals go out. That's really the issue that we're going to be discussing tonight. So many of Christians are cowed by secularism. We're afraid to answer it. We don't know what to say to it. I want to encourage you, secularism is one of the easiest things to answer. It really is. It's not complicated. It's just really loud. And this eventually leads to stuff like this. Now, for our time tonight, I want to start asking the question, what allows someone to do that? Okay, so these guys here are there protesting or marching against abortion, and there's a worldview that informs why they're doing that. We're against abortion because we believe the baby is a human being. We believe that human beings have value because there's a God who tells me that humans have value. There's a transcendent meaning. It's not just my opinion. There's a reason that they're doing this. Likewise, there's a reason this young lady is saying what she's saying. We love killing babies. Why?
The world's on her side.
Because she has a worldview that allows her to say that. And we need to get to what that is and how to address that before we just ignore her or get mad at her or whatever the case may be. So the foundation of what both those women just said and the other people we're going to look at here is the issue of secularism, which ultimately is claiming, I am God. Christian cults, remember, make God into our image. We make God into a man. We make God into a creature like us. Secularism throws God out the window and replaces it with an idol, aka you, and leaves it at that. Well, it never stops at that. How many of you, I want to ask, are Christine and I the only 90s people here? Okay, a couple more, okay. I don't remember the 80s because I wasn't there, but in 1986, there was a movie that came out on a Limb. Anyone remember Shirley MacLaine and that whole thing? Okay, now Shirley MacLaine's not a secularist. She was a proponent of what worldview? What? Hey, wait, what, Patrick? New Age, the New Age movement. Eastern religions, reincarnation, that was her big thing. Why I point this scene out is because this scene in the movie Out on a Limb in 1986 was the first time that a lot of Christians, my grandparents included, saw someone in public, on the big screen, making the statement, I am God. How many of you have seen that movie and that clip and that? Really? Only one? Wow, I thought there'd be more.
I did hear a talk.
Okay.
So.
You can watch this scene, not the whole movie, at least the scene on YouTube. Shirley MacLaine's spiritual guru guy here leads her in this path of discovering that she's part of the great circle of life and the eternal spirit and everything, and eventually gets her at this point on the beach to shout repeatedly and louder, I am God. Meaning I am part of God in the kind of the Eastern Hinduistic, Buddhistic sense. But that was shocking for a lot of people. I am God. And yet that really is the religion of today, not necessarily New Age, but I am the ultimate standard of truth. And it's not really that new of an idea. In fact, long before Jesus, a guy named Protagoras, who was not a secularist, who was not part of the New Age movement, who was a Greek philosopher of that time, looked at his world and came to the same conclusion. You have all these stories of these gods, these different mythologies and things. I don't know the truth, is basically what he was getting at. I don't know what the truth is. All I know is what I've experienced. And so his statement that is often repeated by atheists, secularists, agnostics, man is the measure of all things, has become one of the mottos, one of the battle cries of modern secularism. You'll hear phrases like, religion is the opioid of the masses, and man is the measure of all things. Well, if man is the ultimate measure of all things, not God, because there is no God, what does that really mean? What it really means is everything is up to you because you are God. Not only issues of morals and ethics and politics and education and healthcare, but truth and reality itself becomes yours to bend. If there is no one greater than you, if there's no transcendent authority, being, knowledge beyond you, you do in every way become the measure of truth. And so you'll hear phrases like this in our day and age. That's fine for you, but that's your truth, Becky. That's not my truth. There's a worldview behind that statement. The first time I heard that, it shocked me. It was actually from someone sitting in my church. Not here, no. That's my previous church I was on staff with. I heard that, I was like, what does it even mean? Because I'm coming from a Christian worldview. There's no your truth and my truth. There's God's truth. It's true because God made it, right? There's a worldview behind it where you are ultimately the standard of all truth. And I apologize, that should be up right there. What does that look like? What does that result in? Think through this with me. If I'm the standard of ultimate truth, what happens when you and I disagree?
You're wrong.
You argue wrong.
What's the standard? What's the end result? If me and Patrick have such different truths that we cannot live together, what's the only recourse we have? Thank you. Right there, you nailed it. War. You wonder why the 1900s were such a violent period? There was a reason for it. There was a worldview that was not creeping in. It was smashing the doors in, and it led to the most deaths in a single century in human history, by far. How many of you have seen the movie 1984? I'm not endorsing the movie, just how many of you have seen it or read the book?
I just
I know what it's about.
I would encourage you to watch it just for your personal edification, not real edification, education. There is a bunch of raunchy stuff in the movie, and it totally ruins it because otherwise it is such a deep, thoughtful glimpse into not the future, but to what people have already lived through. My wife's family's from Romania, and they lived through things you will see in that movie.
What's the name of the movie?
1984. 1984. You can watch. I think it's available for free online. I know you can watch it somewhere. I don't know if it's Netflix or where. But did you? Yeah. A lot of kids used to read it in high school, and not so much anymore because it's a bluept for what's happening today. But if you've seen this movie, you've watched something. You've watched a society, a fully secularized society, where truth was ultimately left to individuals who then warred with one another, who created so much chaos and anarchy that they eventually needed something to hold it together, and they created a state of men, of elite individuals who told people what truth was. And so the main character in this movie, 1984, named Winston, it's his job to rewrite history. He works for the government, and it's his job to find old newspaper clippings and government-issued articles and change the things the government needs to change. Like, they give an award to one guy at one point in the movie. Well, later they decide they didn't want his name being out there in public, and they don't want to embarrass themselves by having given this guy an award because now he betrayed the state. And so Winston's job is to go back and erase all that and put a different name on there. It doesn't really matter who. He just kind of slaps someone on there. And he's observing all this. And he's asking the question, wait, why am I doing this? This isn't true. I know what the truth is, and I'm being forced to change the truth. And at the same time, his nation is at war. And last week, we were killing these people. This week, the government's telling me they were our allies. And now we're killing these people, and we've always been at war with these people. I know that's not true because I changed the newspaper articles. And he's struggling with this. And then eventually he runs into this character, and I won't spoil it for you. But this guy here asks Winston a very simple question. How many fingers am I holding up?
No, there was a football.
And you watch the progression of someone who observes truth, observes reality, and says there's 4 fingers, moving down the track of secularism, of state authoritarian secularism, to there's 5. There are 5 fingers. Why? Because the state tells me there's 5. And the state, encapsulating man, is the truth. For all the nerds out there, Star Trek ripped off this scene, and there's this episode where Picard gets kidnapped by the Cardassians. Same exact thing. How many lights are there? There's 4. Anyone have a shirt? It's a total nerd thing you get shirts with. There's 4 lights and Star Trek on it and everything. And the guy with the gun is trying to get Captain Picard to say there are 5 lights. Why? Because the state is the measure of all things. The few elite individuals at the top are the measure of all things. And that's what secularism ultimately leads to. Now, why is that? What allows this to happen? What allows our society to be full of people who think that screaming at one another is an appropriate and meaningful way of communicating with one another? What allows our society to say, we love killing babies? What allows our society to say, I'm not a man, I'm a woman? And you're a bigot, you're going to go to jail if you disagree with me. What allows that to get there? Now, that is the worldview, but one thing that Christians do really bad is addressing the underlying problems. And I tried to encourage you with that in the last 2 weeks. When you talk to a Mormon, please don't waste your time talking about polygamy. It's a relevant issue. It's important. It's a big deal. But the conversation is not going to get you anywhere. Get to the issue of who God is. Is God an eternal being, or is he a created man who lived on another planet, organized matter that pre-existed him? And that's the issue that matters. When you're talking to a Catholic, get to the gospel. Forget the smells and bells and all the other stuff. Those are all symptoms of a more important issue underneath. When it comes to secularism, Christians have long addressed, man, this clicker is not working. Long addressed the symptoms. We talk a lot about abortion, rightfully so. About the LGBT stuff, we're going to talk about next week, rightly so. We've talked about gay marriage, rightly so, and all those sorts of things. But for about 100 years, the other side has let us shoot each other and shoot at the balloons on top of the castle while they're undermining the foundation of the Christian faith. Now, secularists didn't start doing that. That started long before secularism became a thing. It's been going on for hundreds of years. People who, for various reasons, did not want the Bible to be the authority have been trying to undercut it all kinds of different ways. Secularism just grabbed a hold of it and took it to light speed. So what is the thing? What is the thing that allows secularism to survive? What is the crutch? You often hear secularists talk about religion being a crutch for Christians. And they try to kick the crutch out from under you so you fall down. What is the secular crutch? What is the thing that allows it to exist?
We cater to it. The world.
Cater to? Well, yeah, we allow it to. That's true. That's fair enough. The thing that allows a secular worldview to exist, at least in our day, as it's turned out in history, is something called Darwinism. And it's not my opinion. I'm going to let a Darwinist and a secularist tell you that. But the idea that we don't need God allows for a world that doesn't have God. If God didn't make us, if God isn't necessary, if there is no law, if there is no lawgiver, if there's no one who's going to judge us, then why not? what other truth is there other than me if there is no God? And Darwinism gave secularism something to stand on. I'll let Richard Dawkins say it himself. Richard Dawkins, one of the leading atheist, secularist philosophers of the last 50 years. I'll let him share a little bit of his story and how that relates. Okay, so please catch the two statements there. Darwinism gave atheism and the world that they want to live in, secularism, a leg to stand on. It gave it something to prop up itself and say, I'm a viable worldview. And what he's referring to, here's another quote from a clip you can go on YouTube and watch called The Big Question. It was a little documentary episode that Dawkins did back in the 90s addressing this question. The big question, how did we get here? And his statement, that again you can see on YouTube, and that one is, Darwin gave us a much neater, more self-sufficient, and therefore more satisfying explanation of reality, of life, because secularism, atheism, always had to answer a question. How did we get here? How do we explain the intricacies of life and the design that we see all around us? And this is something called the watchmaker question, the watchmaker conundrum. And it goes like this. You're walking out in a field, and laying there in the grass, you find a watch. What does everyone instinctively know? Somebody made the watch. But who made the grass?
Nobody cares at that point.
The grass is far more intricate, far more complex. I mean, the whole system of making a blade of grass is so complex. You have to have the whole water cycle. You have to have sunlight. You have to have everything to make this blade of grass. But no, that's insignificant. We don't need that. But the watch, yeah, we know someone made that. That's the conundrum. And before Darwin, that was very, 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 very difficult to answer. There was no intellectual answer. Darwin gave the world all kinds of naturalism, but his greatest contribution was a philosophical answer to the question how we got here. And it allows what we're seeing today. So you have 100 years of kids being told, you're an accident, you're meaningless, there is no meaning to the universe, you're no more significant than a dead pill bug in your driveway. The only difference is your chemicals are still bouncing around and the pill bug's isn't. That's the only difference. And so no wonder my friend ended his life. Why not? What is life? What is the meaning of it? What's the purpose of it? Secularism doesn't give you anything for that. And very often in this discussion, I'll just mention these two terms very briefly. When I say secularism, I'm including these two terms, but you'll hear these two terms very often, naturalism and materialism. These two words are basically the statements, I don't believe anything supernatural exists, and I don't need to. If I can paraphrase those two thoughts. So a naturalistic materialist says, the natural world is all that exists, and it's sufficient to explain everything. To which you and I as Christians ought to very easily be able to ask, really? Explains everything? The natural world can explain concepts like nobility, love, truth, beauty, consistency. Those are realities that we recognize, but they aren't material. Where did they come from? Where do the laws of nature come from? A naturalistic materialist says the natural world is sufficient to answer all of those things. But we'll see someone argue that here in a minute. All right, real quick. What is probably the number one secular argument against religion and specifically Christianity? What's the number one argument that you've heard or run into?
I guess for me personally, if God real, why bad thing happened?
Exactly. The question of evil is the number one thing. And the defense of God in that is called theodicy. It's a combination of two words, God and justification. Theodicy. Every single worldview has to have a theodicy. Every Muslim, every Mormon, every Catholic, every Christian. But what we forget is every atheist does too. Do not let secularists push you into a corner where you have to defend your worldview, but they don't have to defend their worldview. Everyone has to answer those questions. How did we get here? Why are there bad things? Why are there good things? But you know what? An atheist really struggles to even define those things, let alone tell you why they exist, which we'll see here in a second. But that is the question. So a couple of faces you'll probably see or recognize in this discussion. Well-known faces today: Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Ricky Gervais. Everyone know who Ricky Gervais is, right? He's an actor, made a big splash at the Oscars a few years ago, went viral and everything. Very outspoken, very committed, very articulate atheist, secularist. He might call himself an agnostic. Most really serious atheists will call themselves agnostics, trying to be more consistent. Adam Silverman, we're going to watch a couple clips from Adam Silverman. He was, not currently, but was the president of American Atheists. And he's going to share with you his view on morality here in just a little bit. Margaret Sanger, the mother, quote unquote, of Planned Parenthood. Neil deGrasse Tyson, Sam Harris, Dan Barker. Dan Barker used to be a Christian pastor. I can't remember if he was Calvary Chapel or not. For some reason, I think he was. But was a Christian pastor and then is now a well-known anti-religious secularist. All of these individuals, to one degree or another, are going to make the argument Christianity is wrong, religion is wrong because of evil things that have happened. And they will specifically point to evil things that religious people and quote-unquote Christians have done. So they'll point to the Inquisition, to which we have to admit, those were terrible things. Now, I, as a non-Catholic, don't feel like I have to answer for those things, but
That's not Christianity.
I would agree. I don't have to defend my church in that regard. My church wasn't there for that particular event. But they'll point to stuff like that.
They'll also go as far to say that religion is the cause of all wars.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
And
yeah,
I
right there.
responded online to some of these saying, well, you're discounting every communist regime's
For sure.
death toll ever.
Yes.
Because the communist regimes are seculars, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know one that isn't, really.
And
I mean,
it's-
not that I'm aware of.
and they kill with impunity,
Sure.
and still do.
And even still, even the quote-unquote religious wars, were those consistent with biblical Christianity, or were those in contradiction to biblical Christianity? Very often, not always. There were times, there were things. Okay, what about the Old Testament wars, et cetera, et cetera? We do have to address the issue of evil things that people who call themselves Christians have done. That's absolutely true. One quick note on the Crusades. If you know anything about the history of the Crusades, they sucked. They were really bad at doing crusades. More Christians died probably from other Christians than from Muslims. So just so you know, Christians sacked Constantinople and butchered each other and kidnapped children that went off on the Children's Crusade. Like Christians, quote unquote, were really bad at doing most crusades. So yes.
I've had a lot of people just be like, basically not only that, just also other atheists that can just be like, well, you know, about like, why doesn't God just kill all the bad people then, and there be no more bad people? But then, also they're like, and then we talk about the flood, and they're like, well, why would God do that?
Exactly, right?
And that's
Exactly.
why I said, see, you want God to kill the bad people, but then you complain when God actually does kill the bad
Exactly.
people.
That is a very valid observation. Excellent. Absolutely. That often comes up in discussion of World War II and the Nazis. A lot of secularists will point to that and say, oh, look, Hitler was a Lutheran. He was, quote unquote, a Lutheran, and he helped the Catholic Church, and they did all these things in the name of religion, et cetera, et cetera. And they'll point to things like this, which is true. Anyone know what this is? This is the standard issue belt buckle. There were arm patches, there were helmets. These were all worn by SS units, most of whom are the ones that committed all the atrocities that you're aware of in World War II. And what is printed here is not only the Nazi symbols, but the phrase Gott mit uns, which means God is with us. And many atheists, many secularists will point to that and say, look, religious people, look what the religious people did. Of course, discounting whether that was consistent with what they said they believed or whatever that is. But they will point to things like that. And you and I have to be able to answer those things. However, before you feel like you have to defend it, and you do need to be able to give an answer, there's something deeper that you need to be able to say. Yes, real quick?
From what I know from a historical standpoint, Hitler was very anti-theism because
Yes, he was.
Religion was too strong against
Yeah.
his regime.
Yeah, Hitler was not a Christian in any sense of the word. I don't even think he was, I think he was more occultic than religious, but anyway. All right, so one more clip from Richard Dawkins, and then we're going to get to how we answer this worldview.
Isn't
Right.
that what secularism does, though? My truth. Isn't that the same argument?
Exactly. Now, I'm not trying to defend blind faith. I don't think the Christian faith is blind faith. However, when a secularist brings that kind of accusation or argument against the Christian faith, what is the very first thing you and I have to be able to do?
Show evidence.
Say what?
Show evidence.
No. No, I don't think so. I'm sorry. I'm not just saying no to you, but I don't think I have to show you evidence first. Now, I do believe I have to give an answer. I need to give evidence. I need to reason. However, I'm dealing with a secularist. There's a deeper issue I need to address first. Did you catch it in the clip?
No, what was it? Could you tell me?
What is Richard Dawkins assuming in order to attack faith?
Blind faith? Or that where you
He tried to define the word faith. What word did he not try to define?
But there's no evidence.
He's assuming that you can justify anything through your belief in faith.
Yeah, he's arguing for that. He did not define the word evil. Secularism cannot tell you what evil is. It's a judgment call in your head, in your head, in your head, in your head, in your head. And maybe we have a squishy, broad consensus, but how do you call anything good? How do you call anything evil? Who are you to make that call for me? Before we can get to the issue of whether faith is evil, Mr. Dawkins, please define what evil is, and please stop stealing from God to do it. Every discussion I've ever observed, ever been part of with a secularist who is condemning religion, especially my religion, they steal from God in order to judge God. What God did in the flood was evil. According to who? You? Who are you? Who are you to judge God? Can you even judge a police officer? Do you know all the details of the situation that happened with that police officer? No, you don't know. Can you judge the president? You don't know all the details of the situation and the decision that he had to make and all the information that he had. You don't know those things. And yet you think you can judge God and steal from him along the way. Yes, many absolutely do. You and I have to be able to ask that question first. I do have to defend my faith, but so do you. You have a faith, you have a worldview, and you have to defend it. So what are you offering me? I'm going to show you 4 clips. They're pretty short, but listen to them intently, listen to them in sequence. This is from a debate that was done about 12 years ago, 10 years ago, between, let's see if we can get it there. David Silverman, one of the guys we just saw up there, president of American Atheists, and James White, he's a Christian apologist from Phoenix. He's also a pastor. This debate I have watched probably a dozen times. It is one of the most helpful things I have ever found. Hearing a devout secularist and a devout Christian interact without backing down, without getting squishy, without saying, well, I don't really want to defend everything about the Christian faith. A lot of Christian apologists want to do that. We want to defend a very small target, not the Christian faith. James does a great job defending the whole thing. And James does a great job of asking the questions that we really need to hear the answer to. So there at the bottom of your page, you got a couple blanks. Let's hear David Silverman defend his worldview. And hopefully, you'll be able to do the same in your situations.
Mr. Silverman, to win the debate this evening, you need to establish that...
Oh, I apologize. The thesis of the debate is the New Testament evil? That's the question. Okay. Obviously, the Christian's saying, no, it's not evil. The atheist is saying, yes, it is. Okay. So. Isn't that amazing? The religion of our society admits, I don't know anything, but I can judge God. I can't define what evil is. I can't tell you what evil is. I can't even tell you if you're wrong, let alone if I'm wrong. But I will sit here and judge God. That is the religion that you and I live under each and every day. And we have to be able and ready and willing to look at it and say, no, I don't want that. You're not offering me anything. And before I cow before your pressure to accept this lifestyle or this issue or this worldview, you have to justify it. And frankly, secularism cannot. It has nothing to justify itself. And so I get why people become Mormons or Muslims or Catholics. At least there's something to go to. I honestly do not understand why people, other than the blindness of sin, run to secularism. It is the most empty, meaningless, worthless worldview I think humanity has ever constructed. And yet, that's where our society is running full steam ahead. And we need to be able to tell them, you're not God, Jesus is. And you will be held accountable. And he offers you grace right now. Yes?
People go towards it because it frees them from responsibility, from rules,
Sure.
from community, from taking, any sort of responsibility for their actions and for what they do to others.
I think that ultimately is the answer.
To some people.
Yeah.
But I have had people argue with me
Mhm.
to that point to say, do you think only Christians can be good? Do you
Oh, of course
think
not.
that only because you guys live by a moral code under God that we don't know to not kill, to not, like, how do you answer that? Because I don't think that everyone's bad, but none of us are good enough. That's just my answer. None of us are good enough by God's standards. But if they don't
course.
believe it, how do you explain it to them?
I don't believe anyone's good.
Yeah, exactly. Under God's standards, it's like the
Yeah.
bad. So
Psalm 14, God looks down from heaven on the children of men to see if there's any that does good, and there is not one. That's the point of the gospel. None of us are good. Jesus is, and he offers you grace. So no, no, I'm not saying that I'm better than you. I'm saying I'm probably worse than you. But I have a reason to live my life. I have a reason for the decisions I make in my life and the politics and everything that I do. There's a reason to it. Secularism doesn't give you a reason other than it's convenient. It feels good. And when what feels good for you is not what feels good for me, the guy with the gun wins. And I got a lot more guns than you. So. Yes, Steven.
But there's no logic in their thinking.
I don't believe so. Obviously, they would argue differently, but again, getting those core questions will be helpful to that. Yes. Okay. One more, and then we got to go.
I always do ask the point for anybody who brings up secularism and anything. I always just ask, so what's the point then? I mean, there's no reason for us to be here. There's no reason for life or anything. So what's the point? I mean,
It's fair.
I mean, they're like, well, you could leave stuff for future generations when you die. People will forget about you in 1,000 years. I mean, how much is that gonna? How much
Yeah.
longer?
Why leave anything for your kids? Who says it's good to do that? Okay. Yeah. Exactly. It doesn't offer you any reason to say that's a good thing to do. So, all right. Let me pray for you, and then we'll go. Lord, thank you for tonight. Thank you for the chance that we have to be together, to learn these things together, to think on these things. Father, I pray that this class would be a beginning of a work of your Spirit in our lives to equip us to answer a world that demands answers of us. That we would be able, that we would be courageous enough to look at this world and say, you got to answer these questions too. You got to justify your worldview, just like I got to justify mine. Father, may we know that worldview well enough to ask those questions, but may we also know our worldview, our faith, the scriptures that you provided to us, the revelation that you provided to us well enough to then give a positive answer, not just a negative question. May we be people of grace, reflecting the grace that you have shown us. Father, help us to be gracious, patient, kind, balanced, gentle people, even as we face a society that does not value those things and has no reason to. Father, give us courage and boldness to live for you, we ask this week. In Jesus' name, amen. 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 All right. See you next week. Very good.
I think